Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to episode 226 of the Falcoholic Live. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, back from vacation, joined by a full house of guests tonight. First of all, we have the co-host, Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, how we doing?
Doing well. Doing well. A special Thursday show because we didn't want to make the NFL, compete with us with their Thursday night football. Apparently, Amazon's ratings have already been bad enough this season. I saw a story that they actually have paid some of their sponsors back because it's like 2 million less than what they were expecting. So, we were just doing Amazon a favor on that one. So you're welcome, Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos.
They can't compete, with Falcoholic Live. Our brand is too strong. Speaking of strong brands, we have Aaron Freeman with us tonight at Falc Fans, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast, also known as Sirius Black. Aaron, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. When you first hit me up, Kevin, that you wanted to do a show tonight, I was very confused because I was like, what day is today?
Yeah.
So, I appreciate Adnan breaking it down that way, understanding that Jeff Bezos, he lost all the money. He might have to file for bankruptcy just because of that disaster that was Thursday Night Football. But yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and I'm beefing with Amazon right now because I ordered a almost $200 computer part and they sent me an empty black box that didn't even have branding on it. So we're Amazon and I are beefing right now. But they've said they're going to replace it. So you're on notice, Bezos, until I get my computer parts. The Amazon slander will continue. And shout out to Kevin Dog, by the way, for the $1 donation. Kevin, if you sent a question with that, I did not get it. So feel free to throw that in the chat and I will make sure to answer that for you. But thanks, guys. Speaking of donations, the Senior Bowl funds in full force. I have officially gotten my credentials for the Senior Bowl, hotel and flight booked, so we are all set to go. If you're interested in helping us out with the travel fund, you could donate at the link in the show description, or you can hit up my Venmo on Twitter. Again, guys, really appreciate all that support, and everyone who's already donated, thank you guys so much. Be sure to leave a question with your donation as well that we can get to and discuss on tonight's show. And like and subscribe, all that good stuff as well. But let's jump right into it. We didn't do obviously a post-game show for Week 18 because I was out of town. So let's go ahead and get into that game a little bit. Sort of the tale of two halves. The Falcons were tied with the Bucs in the first half, 10-10. In the second half, the offense really started to find their footing as the Bucs gradually sort of started to rotate in some second-string players. But I think we did see some stuff that will carry over. I wouldn't really denigrate the performance too much because the Bucs started benching some of their starters. I know Aaron has basically called Tom Brady a coward for for not having the stamina to stand up to the relentless Falcons defense for 4 quarters. But interesting game. Certainly the best performance of Desmond Ridder's career so far, even if some of it was against not necessarily the starters of the Bucs. But Aaron, as the guest, I'll let you get the first crack at it. I know you probably talked about it a bunch on Locked On Falcons, but what were sort of your main takeaways from Week 18?
Yeah, I think Desmond Ridder kind of was up and down in the first half against the majority of the Bucs starters. They pulled some guys. I think when people say like, hey, he was successful in the second half only against backups. So I was like, there was a couple of guys out there that was still, stars. Antoine Winfield, Joe Tryon. Like Joe Tryon was basically wrecking Caleb McGarry the whole game. So it didn't matter whether it was first half or second half. I look at Desmond Ridder's performance and I saw a lot of good things. And one of the things I discussed on Locked On Falcons this week was I think that really stood out to me. And this wasn't simply in the second half. A lot of this was in the first half was Ridder's ability to create off structure and make plays and extend plays with his legs. And there was a couple of 3rd and 4th downs in this game against the Bucs where he was able to use his legs to buy himself time, flee the pocket often because Joe Tryon was beating Caleb McGarry and flushing him from the pocket. That's not to disparage Caleb McGarry because everybody knows I live on Caleb McGarry Island, but it was not his best game. That was a big reason why I think Desmond Ridder finished the game if you looked at his passer rating on third and fourth downs with like a 152 passer rating, and a perfect passer rating is 158. So he was very good on those critical downs, and that's a big change from the last couple of weeks of Marcus Mariota, where the third down passing and efficiency was really, really down. So I really think those are the sort of plays that really stood out with Desmond Ridder. And it was nice to sort of see him hit a deep ball to Drake London in this game as well. We haven't seen enough of those this season. So that was another thing that kind of stood out to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with what you said. I liked some of the things we saw from Ridder. The first half was a little bit disappointing, but that's kind of been his story this season. Is that the first halves have been kind of slower, and he's turned it on late. So I like that. It's nice to see the defense hold another team under 20 again. As limited as the opponents they've faced have been. It's still notable that this defense, which we all know is probably the least talented or one of the least talented defenses in the NFL at this point, even holding, lesser offenses to under 20 points is an accomplishment that's worth noting. I don't want to heap praise on them for holding, man, I can't even remember the David Blau of the Cardinals, under 20 or whatever. It's not like a grand achievement, but it's something. They did it. They did enough. They did their part. It wasn't certainly an embarrassing performance, and that was all. Those were all things that I liked for sure. Yeah, Adnan, what did you sort of think? What were your takeaways from the Falcons' victory in Week 18?
I mean, Ridder did look good. And the Ridder's looked better and better each passing week, which is what we were looking for from him, especially following that first game against the Saints, which wasn't so good. In each passing week, he's, for example, increased his quarterback rating. This past week, he had a rating of 108.2. Congratulations to him for throwing his first touchdown pass of his career, the one that went to Michael Pruitt. Found Olamide Zaccheaus later on wide open as well. And, Ridder, he did have some wow moments in this game, like that throw to Drake London in the second half where he, climbed the pocket and, threw the ball just perfectly. It was just slightly underthrown, but he gave Drake London a chance to really go and grab it, and Drake London made, the catch of the game on that play. London was not he wasn't really able to get those opportunities earlier in the season with Marcus Mariota throwing the ball because, Mariota never threw the ball in that vicinity to let his wide receivers or Kyle Pitts go and, sort of make a play on the ball. But, overall, Drake London had his first ever 100-plus yard receiving game of his career. He went for 120 yards. He was an absolute beast out there, including that 40-yard reception. And I would be remiss if we did not talk about Tyler Allgeier, who went for 135 rushing yards, which isn't even a career high thus far because he went for, I think, 139 against the Saints a few weeks earlier. I was on Tyler Allgeier watch all day on Sunday, just tracking how many more yards he needed to get to 1,000 to become the first Atlanta Falcon since Devonta Freeman in 2016 to achieve 1,000 rushing yards. He got there in the third quarter and then he, blitzed past William Andrews for the most rushing yards ever by a Falcons rookie. That's a record that stood since 1979. So it's not a small thing that he moved past it. I know that there is a 17-game schedule, but Allgeier did it in fewer carries than Andrews had back in those days. So, massive congratulations to Tyler Allgeier, who really, has really just taken the starting job by the throat the past few weeks since the bye week. He's been featured in Arthur Smith's offense, and in these past 4 games, he has not gotten less than 95 yards from scrimmage. And he is showing just what he can do with a full carton of carries week in and week out. And, the Falcons have really found something special in the 5th round after really whiffing on those 4th to 5th round running backs year in and year out the past few years. Algier really looks like a mainstay, and he looks like someone that, he looks like RB1 moving forward next season.
Yeah, you love to see it. It's something that we have talked about in the offseason several times, is that you don't necessarily have to spend premium picks to get good running backs. There's a lot of guys, because of the just really overabundance of running back talent in college football, that there's guys every year that fall through the cracks into day two, of course, but also into early day three. And that's exactly where the Falcons ended up scooping up Allgeier, who's been everything I had hoped for. I mean, even more. Like I thought Allgeier would be a good like RB2 by the end of the year, behind Patterson, but he has surpassed Patterson on the depth chart. He's been just running extremely well. His style from college of just being a very physical yards after contact balance monster. I mean, it really has translated. Better than I thought it would. And also, the receiving ability, we didn't get a chance to see it a ton in college, but what you could see is that when he got a chance to catch the ball, he had good hands, and that has absolutely carried over as well. I think he's got good instincts in the passing game. His pass protection hasn't been like amazing, but I think for a rookie, it's been serviceable, and I think that's something they can continue to improve. So yeah, I mean, big props to Allgeier, and yeah, Aaron, I don't think we've had you on since Allgeier really started to emerge either. What are your thoughts on Allgeier sort of taking the reins of RB1 late in the season?
Yeah, I similarly thought he would be a solid RB2 for us this season going into the year. And, I think for the first half of the season kind of was living up to those expectations, not really exceeding them. And it just seemed like a light switch flipped for him once Cordero Patterson came back. And ever since then, he's just been lights out. And, the yards after contact, the pass protection, all of those things were things that he did in college, but I wondered a little bit like how well that would translate to the NFL, given the jump in competition, facing some of the teams that BYU faced, and were able to kind of run down their throat, and some of the better defenses that they faced last year, especially like Baylor. He didn't really produce a whole lot. And so I wondered a little bit like, oh, was he just kind of beating up on lesser competition? And, I think he proved, over the last, 8-9 weeks that was not the case. And, with the Falcons running game, it was for most of the season pretty interchangeable, sort of who was the hot hand, with Patterson sort of starting out the season really strong. And then kind of there in that middle stretch, you kind of saw Caleb Huntley maybe emerge a little bit more with Patterson in the lineup. But then, once Patterson came back and Huntley sort of was pushed to the wayside, and of course, his season was prematurely ended with that Achilles injury. But, ever since Patterson's come back, it's basically been Allgeier has been absolutely the hot hand. And, I feel like I should take credit for his success just because of the Bijan Robinson stuff. Like the minute, I started talking about Bijan Robinson, it seemed like Tyler Allgeier, saw the tweets and was inspired to prove all that stuff wrong. And, I'm fine with it. Like, just keep balling. He's been lights out, especially I think, as I now put it, after the bye week, he just kind of even took it to a different level, and has truly looked like one of the top running backs in the league these last 4 games.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would be the runaway rookie of the year, if not for, Pitt legend Kenny Pickett, probably. But if he had been playing like this all year, I think he obviously would have run away with it. He'd probably have 1,300 rushing yards at least. But just really impressed with his play. And it does complicate the Bijan Robinson takes, of course, and I know how excited you are to really stir the pot with those. But honestly, like, and we won't do a whole show on Bijan yet. We're gonna save that, for when it's gonna be the most contentious possible time. But people hate it because it's an early running back, and I get that. But I just want people to think about who the Falcons have drafted in each of the past 2 drafts, who have and people have disagreed with who they ended up going with, especially me, saying like, I don't want them to take a tight end. I want them to take Justin Fields. I don't want them to take a wide receiver. They need to take defensive line help. So I am officially like no longer just expecting them to do what I want anymore. But I think there is an easy scenario where you're sitting at 8, or they trade back with a team trying to move up for like a Will Levis or something. And Bijan Robinson is the best player on the board. I mean, I think he's going to end up being easily a top 10 graded player for me, because he's just that good. Not saying that I like agree with drafting Bijan for the Falcons or necessarily want them to do that, but it's would it shock you in any way if they do go after him? Because I mean, he could be the biggest blue chip player left on the board when they're drafting, and so far they've shown that that's really what they usually go for early in the draft.
I mean, there's an argument to be made that Bijan is the best player in this draft, like from a talent perspective, like from a pure, don't look at positions, don't look at positional scarcity, don't look at the quarterback tax, that he is the number one talent in this draft, and that he is, the best running back prospect in years and years. And I mean, there's something to say about if the team really wants to go pure BPA. I don't think Arthur Smith would have any issues, finding a suitable role for Bijan Robinson, behind this number one graded offensive line regarding run blocking, and, as a two to three headed monster with this backfield. But, that's something that we'll be able to break down over the next few months. And, it is draft season after all, but that's something that'll really get the people talking, and it's something that'll really, ruffle some feathers throughout the entire offseason. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, Aaron, I know you're a big Bijan ruffler too, but I mean, I think you're doing it for fun, but I mean, I think honestly you probably feel the same way that I do, which is like we should not rule it out at all for the Falcons.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of where it started. It was basically like, hey, draft position, draft value, positional value, all that stuff. Be damned, they like skill position players, and Bijan Robinson, as you said, Kevin, and Adnan, like he's a very talented player. Like for those people that haven't really watched him, the way I would describe his ability is kind of like Todd Gurley, but without none of the knee issues, like that kind of ruined Todd Gurley's career, the injury he had at Georgia, and then sort of the arthritis that developed over the course of his career that led to him not having the sort of longevity that he could have had. But like Bijan has that sort of potential, and rather than just having like 4 years of peak play like Todd Gurley kind of had, you could see more than that. But yeah, that's kind of how it started, where it's like, yeah, this move, I wouldn't necessarily do it, but I could see this regime doing it. And then when it ruffled some feathers, like that's then my brand, yeah. Baby. Like, now I have to keep pushing it, because now I realize like people get really upset from the tweets. So, if I can make people laugh and also make people angry in the same day on Twitter, then, I feel like my mission is accomplished.
And
yes.
I mean, you mentioned, I'm sorry to cut you off, Kevin, but you mentioned Todd Gurley, and I think D-Led still to this day is not over the Falcons, not drafting Todd Gurley over Vic Beasley. And what was a similar situation, the Falcons did not need any running backs at the time. They had Devonta Freeman just going off. They had Tevin Coleman, I think, who they had already drafted. Vic Beasley was the best, pass rusher on the board, and the Falcons filled the need. And I'm pretty sure that, hindsight being 2020, Falcons fans would have, taken Todd Gurley had they known all that they knew, about him, and the Falcons as well. But, we look at this regime in general, and I don't think anyone, at the very least at the end of the season, at this time, the past 2 years in January, I don't think anyone was really expecting them to draft Kyle Pitts at this point. And I don't think anyone was really
except for George.
Yeah, except for George. George was all in. Yeah. And then also, like, I don't think anyone was really expecting them to take Drake London either. I think that was a move that didn't really go over too well with most of the fan base when it did happen. So, this regime loves skill position guys, and this regime does not care what you think.
Yeah, they don't, and that's part of what I think. Aaron, other than the trolling, I think was trying to communicate was that like, don't think what these guys are gonna do with the first round pick, especially. They're gonna draft the guy they think is the best, and look, Bijan is probably going to be the most talented player available at the 8th overall pick. He might even finish ahead. He might even finish in the top 5 for me, just because of the talent. Notwithstanding any sort of positional weighting. And like with Bijan, it's like you see what Arthur Smith did with a guy like Cordarrelle Patterson, obviously, and Bijan is like a young Cordarrelle. He's not the returner that Patterson has been, but a player that is a much more natural running back, certainly has a lot more experience playing that position. Bijan's also a really good receiver, like really good, just excellent hands. I mean, I think he could I think he could be a slot receiver for you. And obviously that's something he would have to work into more, but he's so talented that, and I think you could make an argument from just the Falcons need blue chip players, period. And if there's no other blue chip players available, maybe you just take the last one standing in Bijan. And it's like you're getting a great player. So I think ultimately, if the Falcons just get great players, I would be happy. But it's not going to make a lot of people happy if they were to go that route. But it would be fun, even if it wouldn't help the defense very very much. And I'd feel more comfortable projecting it too if Huntley. I guess I would have felt less comfortable putting it out there as an option if Huntley hadn't gotten hurt. But with Huntley's Achilles injury, there's a decent chance he misses a sizable chunk of next season recovering from that injury. So they don't really have that running back 3 type of guy. I mean, they're going to keep Patterson around, and they've got Allgeier, but the depth there isn't as solid as I think it would have been with Huntley still under contract. Huntley like healthy and coming back. So it's a fun topic. We're going to keep talking about it, but yeah, Ray says we can have 3 running backs in the backfield every day. You joke, but they literally did play like a decent amount of pistol with 2 running backs. So like you joke about that, but maybe that's what Arthur Smith has been angling for all along. So, all right, let me get to some donations real quick before we move into some. Well, these donations are going to make us talk about the quarterback anyway, so this is a good segue into some quarterback talk. But we got Ray Moon with the $5. What's up, Ray? Thank you so much. He says, all right, so Ridder threw his first touchdown pass to Olamide Zaccheaus. Are we comfortable with Olamide being the wide receiver 2 next season? I'll go first on this one. You guys can think if you want to add a take, but Zaccheaus isn't a wide receiver 2. I mean, I think Mariota had like excellent chemistry with him to the point where it almost made him look like one. But I think Zaccheaus is probably a guy you don't want playing more than like a wide receiver 3 role. But I think he does a good job of finding the open spot in the zone. I think he's got enough, traits, and I think he's got good hands. And I think I would bring back Zaccheaus certainly as the wide receiver 3, but I think wide receiver 2, they need an upgrade there for sure. So that's where I stand on that. I would definitely like Zaccheaus to come back. I don't think he'll be overly expensive, but I think that wide receiver 2 would be pretty rich for him. But Adnan, Aaron, do either of you guys have Zaccheaus takes?
I do. Yeah, I kind of generally agree with you. I was fine with Zaccheaus early in the season, sort of serving as that number 2 guy, just because like the Falcons offense was not a pass first offense, and it like didn't really matter. It was just like Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and you were fine with that given how effective the Falcons were running the football. But obviously, as we got further along in the season, we kind of wanted to see, this passing offense evolve a little bit. And, I thought Zaccheaus, as you said, Kevin, played really well with Marcus Mariota and was kind of like the Falcons' most reliable 3rd down receiver, surprisingly for, the early part of the season, and was one of their more explosive playmakers in terms of generating some of those, 20 to 30 yard plays throughout the year. So I think he started strong, but he just never really seemed to be on the same page with Desmond Ridder. And I kind of agree with you. he's ideally more of a number 3 wide receiver. And certainly if the Falcons, whether it's Ridder or somebody else, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that later in the episode, but as the Falcons look to kind of build up their passing game to try to match their running game, which will, is probably not going to happen overnight or anything. I don't think you can really rely on Zaccheaus to be anything more than your third wide receiver option. So I think the Falcons certainly do need to try to upgrade that number 2 wide receiver. I think there will be potential options for them to do that this offseason. I've been hearing rumors that Corey Davis is probably going to get cut by the Jets, and we know that he was basically that number 2 receiver for the Titans when Arthur Smith was there, a couple of years ago. So he makes a lot of sense. I'm sure, other people have other players on their sort of short list as well that would make a ton of sense there. So, yeah, I think Zaccheaus, you want to pay him, keep him as a number 3. He definitely adds value there, but anything beyond that, I don't think is part of where we want to be in the future as an offense if he's higher than that on the depth chart.
Yeah. And go ahead. On. Yeah.
I was just going to say, it would be ideal to bring in, someone, an upgrade, like maybe an Alan Lazard is also going to be a free agent this offseason. Who knows what's going on with Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay, if he's going to come back or not. But I'm not going to panic if we go into next season with Zaccheaus as that number 2 on the depth chart, just because being the number 2 on the Falcons depth chart is being the de facto number 3, more or less, because Kyle Pitts is your number 1 tight end, but he's in reality going to be serving as your number 1 wide receiver, just given where he lines up, given the fact that I'm assuming that Arthur Smith is going to line him up way more out wide, and he will take on more of that Travis Kelce number 1 wide receiver or number 1 receiver role that he has over in Kansas City, and then you have Drake London there as well. But of course, I'm not for paying Zaccheaus as a number 2 wide receiver. I'm completely okay with parting ways with him if the numbers don't work out, but I'm definitely not looking to break the bank on him. But in the interest of bringing in as much help as you possibly can around Desmond Ridder, if he is your quarterback going into next season, then I think it would behoove the Falcons to bring in another legitimate wide receiving weapon who will be a legitimate starter alongside Kyle Pitts and Drake London. But I won't be punching the air if Zaccheaus isn't technically that number 2 depth chart role.
Yeah, I think it's more if there's an injury to like London or Pitts that it becomes a problem, because I think you're right. Like when Pitts and London are healthy, then Zaccheaus is the de facto third option. I think that's fine. But if, like we've seen now with an injury to Pitts and Zaccheaus gets pushed up, the depth chart is very lacking.
We have tight end up in Michael Pruitt.
Yes, and we're going to get to Michael Pruitt, the god, okay? And I think, he's the new unicorn, I think, according to Aaron. So we got I love Michael Pruitt. That man definitely needs to be re-signed. I'm a big fan of his. But yeah, I think it's more like the Falcons need a wide receiver to, not necessarily because they desperately need another option in the passing game. I mean, I think they could obviously benefit from that, but I think it gives them a lot more protection in case of injury, where they're basically an injury away from having a very, very limited passing game. So that's where we are there. Next up, we got Corey with the $5. What's up, Corey? Thank you so much, man. He says, who is the least likely team to draft Stetson Bennett, and why is it the Falcons? Is it because the Falcons don't want a polarizing player and are willing to pass on talent in order to not get heat? Fontenot was at the Peach Bowl. Hope he was watching. Now, I definitely disagree that the Falcons don't want to draft polarizing players, because they drafted Kyle Pitts instead of, a quarterback, which I think was pretty polarizing at the time. And
London Pitts is also polarizing.
Yeah, so I definitely don't think it's that. I think it's more. I don't really see them drafting a quarterback at all, to be honest with you, unless they're really get aggressive at the top for one of these top guys, because I know some people are low on Ridder. I I really don't see an upgrade out of anyone that's not named like Bryce Young or CJ Stroud even. Like I'm all the way out on Will Levis. I don't like it. I don't really think he's a big upgrade over Ridder. I mean, he's got a better arm certainly, but I think processing wise, pro ready wise, he's got a ways to go to catch up to where Ridder is. So I would rather just roll with Ridder and build up the rest of the roster there. I mean, I don't hate Stetson Bennett as a day 3 pick. I do think he has a long NFL career ahead of him as like a high-end backup, but the size concerns are going to follow him. And really the other part of it is that he's a really old rookie, so there's just not, you don't have the runway for development that you have with a lot of these younger guys, and the same thing could be said about a guy like Hendon Hooker. The runway for development is shorter. There's less time to, it's not like a guy like I think Justin Fields was 21 when he came out or something like that. You have so many more years to develop this guy, as opposed to like a Bennett or a Hendon Hooker or whatever. And same thing with Ridder. I think Ridder's like 22. You still have the development timeline there as well. So I don't think the Falcons are likely to draft Stetson Bennett. I don't think they're the least likely team to draft him. I mean, they certainly do need another quarterback in here. I think we all agree that Marcus Mariota is probably not coming back. So, but yeah, do you guys have, I know George Costanza asked a question about Bennett too, and I'll get to that in a second, but do you guys have any Stetson Bennett takes?
It just sounds like you hate Georgia. But that's what it
just like anti-dogs,
Yeah, it sounds like you don't want a 2-time national champion, who should have won the Heisman this year if not for the anti-Georgia bias in the media. So, I just feel like it's just anti-Georgia bias.
So many people were predicting they were going to go 6-7, 5.
Yeah, they were going to go 5-7 this year. So I don't know how Kirby Smart did it. I don't know how he convinced those guys that
whatever you need to tell apparently whatever he's doing is working. So
but no, it's Stetson Bennett is Lamar Jackson's age. Like this year, they're a few months apart. Lamar's a few months older, but they were born the same year. Like Bennett's 2 years older than Desmond Ridder is right now. Like I think the Falcons, if they do roll with Desmond Ridder going into next year, they do need another quarterback. But I think that they would much rather that be a veteran backup quarterback, someone who can teach Desmond Ridder as much as possible. Someone who, if Desmond Ridder does go down, or if Desmond Ridder disappoints or regresses next season, someone whom you can hand the reins off to and your season isn't completely lost. And, I know that Stetson's a bit old, but I don't mean veteran regarding in that way. But
he might as well be a veteran at this point.
Just the age of a few veterans. But yeah, and also that Felipe Franks has that number 3 quarterback spot on lock. So, he has tenure on the Falcons depth chart, so he's not going anywhere.
Aaron, you got any Stetson Bennett takes for the people?
Yeah, no, I'm not a Georgia fan, but like watching Georgia the last couple of years, like Stetson's polarizing. Like he was very polarizing last year,
especially early. Yeah,
yeah, and like when I watched him, I'm like, yeah, like he's not the world's greatest quarterback, but I think he's pretty good. And like I feel like we're all like, I can't speak for everybody, but like, Bryce Young is QB1 for me. And I'm like, if I'm willing to overlook the fact that Bryce Young is like 5'2", 145 pounds, like why can't I overlook the fact that Stetson Bennett is like 5'10", 185 pounds? And, I think he can be a functional NFL quarterback. And, I will say, like he'll be a day 3 pick or something like that. And I think the Falcons, there's a path where the Falcons can pull the trigger on Stetson Bennett with one of those, like they have like 2 7th-round picks, if I'm not mistaken. And we know from last year that they love taking, the dregs of the Georgia draft pool late in the draft. So, if Stetson Bennett is still there in round 7, and especially I think I agree with Adnan, like they're probably going to add a veteran this offseason. But if that's not necessarily an inspiring, signing, if they wind up settling for someone like a Chase Daniel or Mitch Trubisky, who I think are probably the 2 best bets to be those veteran signings, I think you could absolutely justify using a 7th-round pick, taking a flyer on Stetson Bennett and seeing if he can, compete with Logan Woodside for the number 3 quarterback spot, so that we don't ever have to see Felipe Franks ever take another snap at quarterback, and therefore, we can fully invest all of our resources into Felipe Franks being the tight end unicorn that can take over for Michael Pruitt in the future.
I will say though, those training camps will be packed. Like the Hill will be absolutely packed. And 2, the second that Desmond Ridder makes a single mistake, that everyone, all the Georgia fans will be calling for it. Get Stetson in there as the number 1. Desmond Ridder can't handle it. He never won a national championship.
Yep. He did make the college football playoff. He just didn't win, unlike the god Stetson Bennett. So
with Cincinnati too. Like that Cincinnati team was, no disrespect to Sauce Gardner.
They had like 3 or 4. They had like 5 draft picks, I think. That Cincinnati
team.
But
that was not a Georgia level team.
It was not a Georgia level team, no, for sure. But no. Honestly, like Stetson Bennett, I think has absolutely proven that he is a NFL worthy player. But yeah, the age, the size concerns. Honestly, he's looked like a better athlete than I thought this year too. Georgia's used him a little bit more as a runner. So like, I honestly think that he sort of does fit what the Falcons are doing on offense to a certain degree. So it's like it honestly isn't like the most outlandish take that they might be interested in him as a backup. But the starter talk needs to calm down, and the Falcons probably actually won't do it just because of just how contentious it'll be to get a dog in here at quarterback, and how much chaos that will cause. But speaking of chaos, George Costanza with the $50, by the way. Yeah, go ahead.
It will help us meet our Georgia quota. 2
there you
players.
go.
2 players per draft. 2 Georgia players per draft.
So if we get Stetson, we just need to find 1 more. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we need to get some championship pedigree in here. God knows Atlanta
some
has
winners. Yeah, get some winners in here. We got George Costanza with the $50. George, thank you so much, brother, man. Really appreciate that. He says, all right, been super busy, so I haven't had time to donate or participate to send our boy Kevin to the Senior Bowl. So he's putting this take out here. I need to know if this is serious, George, because your predictions for the Falcons' first-round pick are very, respected around here. He says, with the 8th pick in the NFL draft, the Atlanta Falcons select Stetson Bennett. He's a winner, and you can't teach that. Yeah. So I imagine George is, being facetious, but we need to know if that's your official prediction, George, because we're going to write it down.
I do need to get the George Costanza stamp of approval, like first-round pick this year. Last year it was Jordan Davis. 2 years ago it was Kyle.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So I am looking forward to it in the next month or so, getting the official George Costanza prediction for it.
Yep. I'm sure we will get that soon. We got Jason Gaines for the $2. He says, Aaron, recently bought a 12-pack of Built Bars from my Sam's Club, and they were actually pretty good. Yeah.
Of course
Built Bar did a good job with cookies and cream flavor. Also, it was nice to see the Falcons finally beat Brady. Yeah, agree on all those counts. Honestly, though, like, I'm not, sponsored by Built Bar, but they actually are good. I do actually think they have some pretty good flavors.
I don't think I've ever had one, actually.
They're good. Some flavors are better than others. Yeah, and I'm
contractually obligated to say that they're good, but they actually are good.
Yeah,
Well, I know we're giving Built Bar some.
Built Bar, hit me up, by the way. Hit me up, Built Bar.
I'm sure Built Bar is very, very happy right now, Aaron. By the way.
Yeah.
But what is the best flavor to get?
Are you like coconut?
Oh yeah, big coconut guy.
Yeah, I would agree with what Aaron's gonna say.
Coconut almond is a good one. The best one, they don't always sell it, is the coconut brownie chunk. That is the creme de la creme.
Yeah, so coconut almond's like an almond joy. It's really good.
That's the local Sam's Club, Costco.
Yeah, they've started to sell them at
Sam's Club and Walmart.
Stores. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, they actually are pretty good. They're decent protein. I think they have pretty good macros and stuff. If you're into that, I mean, I just was like looking for a snack, but
it's like everyone has about somewhere between 15 and 18 grams of protein.
Okay, well, sounds like a great post-workout snack.
Yeah, there you go. Pound your Built Bar, get your pump on. There you go. Hit me up, Built Bar, by the way. If you want more plugs like that. So, all right, we got George Costanza with the $10 again. George, big spender tonight. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. He says, also, wasn't it you guys that said the Eagles and Jalen Hurts weren't going to be good? I don't think so.
I don't think we said they wouldn't be good.
I think we liked your bet. I think we were like in approval of you putting 10 grand on the Eagles and sharing it with us. So if I wish the government hadn't stopped you from betting on them, because we would have been in line for a windfall. Yeah.
Imagine how much
He said he
more
was gonna.
fun Jordan would have had this season
Yeah.
if the government didn't stop him.
Yeah, he said he was gonna figure out what the maximum donation was and send it our way if he won that. So, I was in favor of that approach for the record, but yeah, the government stepped on his toes. So,
What was the a little more anti-government on this pod?
save it for the politics pod this offseason.
Joe Biden.
Was it just for the Eagles to win the NFC, or was
I think it was the
for
Super
Eagles
Bowl.
to win it all?
I think it was
to
the
win
Super
it all.
Bowl. Yeah,
Okay.
I think he had like plus 10,000 on it or something. What was the odds at the time?
Because let's be honest, the only their biggest competition in the NFC right now is Brock Purdy and company.
Brock Purdy, who actually has been pretty good. No offense to Brock Purdy. He got a
He's
Purdy
been
mouth.
so good. God, I miss Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Anyway, moving on. Moving on. We got all right. Thank you guys for all the donations. It's derailing the show a little bit, but this is pretty fun, so we're gonna keep going. All right, we got Mad Tom K with the $5. He says, "What position group do you guys most want the Falcons to address in free agency?" Thank you, Mad. Appreciate that. I can't speak for everyone. To me, it's probably like interior defensive line. That's what I'm going with. But Adnan, what do you think? Where are you landing?
Yeah. Interior defensive line. We've been looking for a second defensive tackle next to Grady Jarrett forever. Like literally since he's been drafted, we've given him zero help at all. I don't know why he, was so eager to resign last year. To be honest, between me, just taking my bias out of it. Yeah, there's going to be some good ones. Like there's going to be some really good ones. De'Aaron Payne, I think, would be a dream signing, and I think if he is allowed to hit the market, I think the Falcons should be knocking on his door with a great offer that they will be able to offer him given their cap space. So I would love to address the interior defensive line in free agency, and I would love to address the edge rushers in the draft. So, two-pronged approach there and completely rebuild that front seven.
Yeah. What do you think, Aaron? You on the IDL train too, or do you have another position you prefer?
No, I think certainly interior D line. It's a deep free agent class on that position. And so, the Falcons should be able to get like 2 or 3 guys there if they really want to bolster that. And, Deron Payne's obviously going to be the top of the class, but you got guys like Matt Ioannidis and Dalvin Tomlinson and, so many other guys that you could go after to really upgrade that position group this offseason. But another position that is also deep in free agency that I would like to see the Falcons go after is safety. I think Jalen Hawkins was fine this year as a starter, but we even saw towards the end of the year with the team kind of mixing in Isaiah Oliver there at that safety position, it kind of tells you that it doesn't seem like they're too happy with Jalen Hawkins as a potential starter. Richie Grant, when he's on, he's very good, and when he's off, he's
he needs to tackle, for God's sake. That's it. He just needs to freaking tackle. Yeah.
When he's undercutting, deep bombs to Rashid Shaheed, it's a little iffy on a couple of those things. So I think, I would love to see this team go after Jesse Bates. If they're going to make a big splash and go for one of these premium free agents, if you're asking me in part due to the depth at the D tackle position, I would, between Jesse Bates and Deron Payne, I'd probably prefer Jesse Bates over Payne, just because I feel like you can get probably a player close to as good as Deron Payne for probably half the price. Yeah. And I don't know if you can get the same at the safety position, although there are some other talented players that are hitting the market this offseason. But I just think that Jesse Bates would be sort of perfect for this defense. So outside of that, I think free agency, we're talking about the running back position with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Allgeier, but there's also some good running backs available. I know Ryan Pace. Yeah. We'll probably have to lock him in a closet when David Montgomery hits the open market, because I know he's going to want to make that move happen.
He's the running back Frankenstein.
And tight end's also a pretty strong position as well. We know Arthur Smith loves his tight ends, and linebacker is pretty solid as well. So I think the Falcons will have opportunities to address a lot of areas that they either don't necessarily need and just love to sign guys at, like tight end and running back, or positions like D tackle, safety, and maybe depending on your perspective of, Rashaan Evans, linebacker would also be another position.
Oh, or they could always get both Bates and Payne. We have the money.
They do have the money to do that. Yes, they do.
Yes.
And that would definitely win the offseason.
Yeah, they would they have, I'm doing a full deep dive on the whole cap situation, but they do have 57 players on the roster right now, which is the second most of any team in the league. So they're already under the top 51 rule. They already technically have enough players to fill out their roster. So it's not out of the question that they could just completely splurge on a couple guys. But I tend to think that they will splurge on one guy and then go after a lot of sort of, I hesitate to call them mid-level free agents, but it's sort of like the guys that are going to be making like 6 to 10 million as opposed to like 20. And I agree wholeheartedly with Aaron that Jesse Bates is the guy I would have circled for their prime free agent because, first of all, he's the model of consistency at safety. They really need range back there, and he can do it. He's also a good tackler. They need that as well. A blue chip guy that they desperately need to add to the defense. And look, safety is underrated, I think, in terms of importance to defenses, and NFL teams don't necessarily line up to go pay safeties. So if the Falcons come with a strong offer for Bates, they might not have as much competition as compared to a guy like Daron Payne, who is going to have every single team with money lining up to offer him a contract for the most part. So, and I don't even know that he gets out of Washington, to be honest. So, I agree that Jesse Bates is probably, despite my idea that they're probably going to spend the most cumulative money at defensive tackle this year, and especially if you include Grady Jarrett in that calculation, because they're paying him quite a bit already. I think Bates, like safety, getting Bates in here, I think is an excellent idea, and that's probably my preference for splash signing. But I do think defensive line is obviously a close second too. So yeah, a lot of good takes there. George Costanza says, with the $1 for QB2, I'd love to see us move to acquire Chase Daniel. He's an established veteran that always elevates young starters. Yeah, I mean, I think a guy like Chase Daniel will make a lot of sense. I think if they do decide to stick with Ridder, and that's a good opportunity for us to segue into the quarterback conversation here, they probably want an established veteran, high-end backup to potential starter type of guy to be Ridder's backup, someone that can bolster him, help him with his experience, someone like a Marcus Mariota, but I think that bridge seemingly has been burned. We don't know that for sure, but the buzz coming out from pretty much everywhere seems to suggest that that is the case, and no matter what, the Falcons are going to cut Mariota. So, I mean, there's always a chance that, they mend things and he comes back, because I think he does make a lot of sense as the backup. But, yeah, I'm curious, Aaron, I'll let you get the first take. Obviously, you did a whole thread, I think, on why you're sort of in favor of at least giving Ridder the shot in 2023. But, what is sort of your read on the quarterback position for the Falcons? I mean, are you mostly in favor of Ridder being the guy? Do you want to see them make a bigger move there, or just sort of bring in a veteran to bolster the position?
Yeah, I mentioned Chase Daniel earlier. He basically, in Chicago, when Mitch Trubisky was there, when they were trying to get the most out of him, he was basically that veteran backup extra coach there. And, of course, Dave Ragone was a quarterback coach there. Charles London, who's now the quarterback coach here, was the running backs coach there. So they have some familiarity with Chase Daniel being that sort of veteran mentor. And I am in favor of the Falcons rolling with Desmond Ridder. I've seen enough from Desmond Ridder to sort of confirm, for me at least, the belief and the hope and the optimism, whatever you want to call it, that he can be an above average starter in this league. Now, it's going to take some time to develop that, but I think this season it makes perfect sense to see what you have with Desmond Ridder, to see, given the growth that we've been talking about that he showed from game 1 to game 4, what can he do from game 5 to game 22 or whatever. And that gives you a real cheap quarterback. He's going to make like $1.2 million, I think, this year against the cap. And, that allows you to go out there and spend all the money in free agency that we're talking about to bolster the rest of the roster and improve those areas. And then, at the end of the year, you can kind of reassess where you are with Desmond Ridder. If he's shown the growth that you want to continue down that path, you can do so. If he hasn't, then you're right back into the quarterback conversation that we are today. And contrary to the popular opinion, I don't necessarily expect the situation in the league a year from now is going to be way worse. And like the Falcons have to get their guy, this year, because they're never going to get an opportunity to get another guy. So I really think when you look at this regime and some of the statements that they've made, Arthur Smith's made the statement several times, which is the belief of building up the roster and then going get the quarterback. And I think rolling with Desmond Ridder for at least another year is exactly fitting with that strategy. But I know there's going to be a lot of talk about the Falcons maybe making a play for Lamar Jackson or Derek Carr. If Ryan Tannehill gets released, I could definitely see the team, rolling with Ryan Tannehill for a year or so, given Arthur Smith's familiarity with him. I don't necessarily see Carr as an option going to something I think you said earlier today on Twitter, Kevin, that he's not a great scheme fit. Of course, Lamar Jackson's a great scheme fit, but the price that you're going to have to pay to get Lamar Jackson just seems so prohibitive. And like, there's no doubt that you're getting one of the better quarterbacks in the league, but you have to question the same conversation we've been having for the last 5 years with Matt Ryan, which is, is that contract and the resources that you need to put, a Super Bowl caliber team around him. Can you do that if you wind up trading, multiple first round picks, multiple second round picks, as it's likely to take to get Lamar Jackson out of Baltimore? Can you really put a good team around him by just basically, spending money this offseason in free agency and having less spending money in the future because you're paying a significant chunk of your salary cap to Lamar Jackson? So, I think there's certainly a timeline where the Falcons do make a play for Lamar Jackson because they are at a point where they have built up the roster and they do feel like they're a quarterback away from really competing at the highest level. But I don't think that's, 2023. That may be a 2025 conversation. And we'll see if Lamar Jackson is still available because he's been franchise tagged by the Ravens, 2 years in a row, and all that sort of stuff. So, I just think the Falcons, it makes total sense to just focus on, let's get the rest of the roster up to speed. Desmond Ridder can give us competent quarterback play for very, very cheap as we work towards doing that, because this team does not necessarily, and I know maybe some people will come for me for saying this, but like, it's not as if they have a Super Bowl window that they have to win right now, and we have to try to get the most out of these next couple of years, like we were trying to do with Matt Ryan, his last 4 or 5 years here in Atlanta. I think that's the beauty of rebuilding, is that you can sort of reset the clock and say, we just need to continue to build it and make progress. And it's not a ticking clock of, we have to win now, we have to get over this hump right now. And that to me is pointing in the direction of Desmond Ridder and probably a mid-level sort of backup like a Chase Daniel or Mitch Trubisky, assuming that the Steelers wind up cutting him.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I agree with a lot of your points there, that this is everything we've seen except for one thing that may or may not have really been the goal of the front office and coaching staff, and may have been more of a play by the ownership. I'm not going to get too much into that, but other than that one thing, everything we've seen from this coaching staff and front office has been patient. That they were not looking to rush the timeline. And to me, if that is where you are, and that is what you believe is happening with this team, which is what I do believe. I mean, I don't have this on any sort of inside source or any sort of thing. This is just my perception of the situation. I do think that the Falcons are still being patient. I mean, you look at the quotes from this offseason conference where they're not necessarily, Arthur Blank is making it clear that he's not really pushing for this team to be a contender next year. I think we would all love that, but we've seen Arthur Blank come out and say sometimes when he is itching for this team to win. And I think he saw that extra pressure not only didn't result in wins, but it resulted in some very short-sighted, erroneous moves that actually put the team further back than anything. And I think maybe Arthur Blank has learned a little bit from that, and this new regime has also been a part of that, and that they're building a longer-term strategy. A more sustainable year in and year out contender is the goal, not just an all-in team. And if that is the case, and if you are like me and you believe that's the case, I think it's pretty clear that the Falcons aren't going to mortgage 3 first-round picks, which is what it's going to take at minimum for Lamar Jackson. Minimum. It's probably going to take more. If they're not willing to do that, then they're not willing to trade multiple firsts to get up into the top 3 for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I think those are 2 good quarterbacks. I think Bryce Young is the one that I see with more star potential. But the Falcons, unless they're willing to give up serious assets, they're not getting ahead of the Texans at 2 for that. So I agree with what you're saying, Aaron. I think Desmond Ridder showed you enough flashes, showed you that consistent week over week improvement, and did it, with a dilapidated receiving core and with a, offensive line that was an elite run blocking line. But let's be honest, they were still struggling quite a bit in pass pro. McGarry unfortunately had one of his worst pass protection games of the year in week 18. I think he honestly, as on the whole, did have a much better season in pass pro than in years past. And I'm not going to necessarily hold week 18 against his entire season's worth of work, but this is still a roster that's not good. And I think Ridder showed, he went 2-2, didn't exactly beat a bunch of world beaters, but also the Falcons are not a world beater. So it's like, oh, well, who did they beat? Well, like, they're the Falcons with like they spent like some of the least amount of money on their roster of any team in the NFL. Like, why are you expecting them to be thrashing bad teams when they are a bad team? I mean, they won 7 games again when a lot of markets had them pegged when the over-under was 5 wins or 4.5 wins for most of the offseason. So I would encourage people to be patient, and I agree with what Aaron said, that I do think that Desmond Ridder is likely to be the guy. I do think there will be a quarterback addition made, but I don't know. I would doubt that it would be like a significant investment. It's probably going to be more of a high-end backup experienced sort of veteran player like a Chase Daniel or, I know someone in the chat mentioned Case Keenum. I think that's another name. If the Bills don't bring him back, he makes a lot of sense. So I agree with those takes. But Adnan, Aaron and I have taken up all of the air in the room, obviously talking about this, but what is your take on the Desmond Ridder or other quarterback situation for 2023?
I'm fine. I'm fine with rolling with Ridder going into next year. I think I was very iffy about it after the first, performance against the Saints, but I think he's done enough and he's shown enough over the course of the last 4 games. I've seen enough improvement to warrant him being given that opportunity to be quarterback 1 going into next season. I am still very upset that they waited that long to pull the plug on Mariota because, imagine getting 4 games from Desmond Ridder and then still having another 4 games left to see. That was the entire point of us calling for Ridder for as long as we called for him. We wanted that evaluation. We wanted to see, how he competes. Like, wins and losses didn't really matter this year. It's just Arthur Smith and company let a weak division cloud their judgment in my opinion. And, they lost valuable, time, valuable evaluation time when it came to Ridder. I think the point will really be moot regarding Lamar Jackson because I don't see any way that the Ravens are going to let him go this offseason. Yeah. I think he will for sure be tagged. So I don't it's fun to talk about. It's fun to speculate over, but I don't think that there's really going to be quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson in his prime aren't really made available almost ever. Like, I know that Deshaun Watson was made available last year, but that was a completely different scenario entirely. And he left the Texans for completely different reasons. This is a conversation I think we could circle back toward if they tag him 2 years in a row, just because franchise tag rules are like that it's really, really difficult. It's nearly impossible to franchise tag anyone for 3 consecutive years. To tag him for 2 years in a row would be incredibly difficult as well against their cap space. And that's a team that's really up against it when it comes to the salary cap. I think that we're going into next season with Desmond Ridder as the number one quarterback, and we'll be able to evaluate if we want to move forward with him as the full-on franchise quarterback in a couple years, given a whole year of evaluation. I think he has earned that. But I am still going to be keeping a close eye on this Lamar Jackson scenario that's playing out in Baltimore, because that seems like, not this offseason, but that seems like something where that could be heading toward a divorce eventually. And I think that if the Falcons aren't sold on Ridder, they'll be in prime position, and they will be very, very willing to roll those dice and to get an MVP in his prime, even if the cost is going to be, rather immense.
Yeah. I mean, the cost will be immense, but I mean, Lamar Jackson is a league MVP, literally a perfect scheme fit for Arthur Smith's offense. I mean, if he wants to come to Atlanta, I think they'll get it done. Like if it becomes public, or if Lamar makes it clear he wants to come here, I think they'll get it done. I just don't think.
You mean if he calls Arthur blank and is like, "Oh, bring me to Atlanta, please"?
Don't you bring that up? Don't you put that evil on me? Okay, don't you put that evil on me? But
yeah, we'll get Big Boy. We'll get the celebrities to roll out the red carpet for him.
No, I mean, it's like Lamar tempts you to give up the assets because he is such a special player, and I think he's actively been held back by Baltimore's offensive system, and it's not necessarily his fault. Baltimore's dealt with a lot of wide receiver injuries. They haven't necessarily added enough wide receiver talent there. They've definitely had good tight ends like Mark Andrews, and obviously Falcons have Kyle Pitts and the god Michael Pruitt. So, obviously comfortable situation there. But yeah, it's I don't think he leaves Baltimore this year. I think they'll tag him. At best they will tag and trade him. He's not hitting free agency. I will 100% guarantee you there's no way he hits the open market. He will be tagged and traded at best. So the Lamar situation will probably drag on until he gets an extension or is traded. But even if he is floated on the market, like I said earlier in the show, every single team that has any quarterback need, even a small one, is going to inquire about Lamar Jackson because he's that good. Like, he is an NFL MVP who is 26 years old. So those guys don't come available. And say what you will about the injuries, whatever, Lamar Jackson is an elite NFL quarterback. And the Falcons would be foolish not to inquire at the very least about acquiring him. But I don't think it's likely. I think I tweeted out, I think there's a 5% chance he ends up in Atlanta. But 5%'s not nothing. I mean, it's a realistic possibility, but it's not likely to happen. I think it's much more likely that, yeah.
I don't think he moves at all this offseason.
No,
they will work out the funds, and I have a franchise tag article that goes every single year that I update that pretty much details why it would be so difficult for them to tag him over and over again. Quarterbacks have beaten the tag before. The franchise, players have some leverage. Kirk Cousins beat the franchise tag with Washington a few years ago when he wanted out. Lamar Jackson, if he really wants out of Baltimore, if that relationship is so strained, he just needs to play out the next couple of years, no long-term security, getting top quarterback money, for in each of these next 2 years. And then after these next two off seasons, they cannot tag him again. Financially, it would be the largest cap hit in NFL history by far. And I do not think that they will be able to move things around to the point where they'll be able to do that for a third consecutive year. Now, this is still years away, but they'll read the writing on the wall at that point, and they will trade him the offseason before. And, they will have their leverage in having him on their roster. But Lamar Jackson, the first step toward this divorce was them not coming to terms on an extension last offseason. The next step will be them not coming to terms again and franchise tagging him. If he plays this season under the tag, I think he's gone next offseason if they
Yeah.
can't come to terms again.
Yeah, I do think there's a 50% chance that Lamar is a Raven long term, and like just stays with the Ravens. I think that's the most likely outcome by far. If he does leave the Ravens, he's getting tagged and traded, and the Falcons have, a puncher's chance at getting him, but I don't think that they're necessarily in the driver's seat for it or anything of that nature. The one thing they have in their favor is I think that Lamar fits this scheme so perfectly that he might be like, I want to go there because I think this is a team that really fits me super well. And I like what they're building there and all that stuff. But other than that, I don't think it's particularly likely. So don't waste too much time like thinking about it. We'll see how it develops over this offseason or if he even gets out of Baltimore. But yeah, that's sort of where we are there. Do have a relevant quarterback question from Andre Fuller with the $5. Thank you so much, Andre. He says, I don't understand the Ridder apprehension. He improved every single week, displayed great leadership on the sidelines. I don't think any of the 2023 prospects are significantly better than Desmond, and we won't be bad enough to get a top 5 pick in 2024. Build the defense. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about this quarterback class is there's not like a slam dunk guy. I do think Bryce Young is really good. He has the star potential, and I think CJ Stroud has the like ideal sort of measurements. And it's like you maybe wanted to see him. CJ Stroud, I think, could have been that guy this year, but he didn't have the best season. And there are still some questions about his eval. I mean, again, I'm not like a quarterback guru or anything like that. Like, I just sort of watch these guys, get a gut feeling, and then I rely on guys like Derek Klassen and Mark Schofield for the technical stuff. But, I mean, I think there's with Bryce Young, you got size questions. With CJ Stroud, you got ability to handle pressure questions. I mean, he did a really good job against Georgia, but season long, there were questions there. So I agree. Like, I don't think the Falcons are going to be trading up for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And, I think, they're probably not going to have a top 5 pick in 2024. I agree. But if Ridder flames out this year, then you need to be aggressive for a quarterback in 2024. And I think they'll probably have, if they don't go crazy this year, I think they will have the assets to do that next year, to go for that quarterback if they need to. So yeah, I think that the Ridder apprehension comes from people. And I know that there's a lot of like non-Falcons fans that are questioning whether Arthur Smith would be willing to sort of tie himself to Ridder and what a lot of outside people believe is like a must-win season for Arthur Smith. Like he needs to make the playoffs or he's going to be fired. And, I could understand why outside writers and analysts might think that. And it's not that unusual, right? Generally, a coach needs to make the playoffs in his 3rd season to continue being employed by that team. But that's not the vibe I got at all from that press conference. And honestly, the vibe I've gotten from this whole regime is that they're going to be really patient. And yes, they need to probably have a winning season next year. But I think from everything we've seen about how this team is constructed, they could have a winning season with Desmond Ridder, I think, playing at the level he's shown so far. And I think him getting better, I think, is almost a certainty. How much better is the question, right? Like, does he get better to like average NFL starter level, or does he get better to like a Dak level where he really just improves a lot over time? That's really the question with him. But I do think that there's a lot of opportunity for Ridder to have a good NFL career. Yeah, Aaron, did you have something to add there? I didn't. Go ahead.
You said something earlier that I was like, oh, that's a good point for me to jump
Then
in.
I just kept talking for like 20 minutes. Yeah.
No, I think, I think it had something to do with people's apprehension with Desmond Ridder. And it's understandable because we sort of look around the league and, especially when you look at the AFC and there's so much pressure that if you want to win in especially the AFC, like you have to have a high level quarterback. Now, the NFC is not the same, right? Yeah. And so like I don't feel like there's as much pressure for a team like the Falcons to feel like we have to go out there and get a guy that we feel like can duel with, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow in January, right? In the NFC, it's just like just look at it's Kirk Cousins, it's Jalen Hurts, it's Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, and so I think you can feel pretty good about where the Falcons are. That if we can build up the rest of the team and build up the defense, you can go forward. And again, no one's sitting here saying that you can win a Super Bowl with Desmond, or at least I'm not saying that, like with Desmond Ridder next year or anything like that, or potentially ever. But I think he gives you a capable quarterback, at least potentially, that can, play games, meaningful games in January as you build up the rest of the roster. And I think, sort of punting the quarterback's decision to, the future, especially if I think a lot of us get what we want to see from this team this offseason, where they invest significant resources in building up that defense, you can be in a position a year from now where it's like, okay, now we have a legit top 15 defense. And now it does feel like we need to go out there and get a quarterback that can elevate, and get the most out of this roster with, Kyle Pitts, having a rebound season and Drake London looking like, one of the better young receivers in the league. And then you can make a more informed decision on is your quarterback holding you back in the ways that I think a lot of people looked at, Marcus Mariota potentially holding this team back this past season. So, I think it makes sense for the Falcons to be patient. The apprehension, I think, is just from a general, at least from my perspective, a general expectation that you got to have a top 5, top 10 quarterback to be successful in today's NFL. And I think at least this playoff season, and doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to maintain the playoff, but in the NFC, it doesn't feel like, it's that important because, Aaron Rodgers might be done in Green Bay. Tom Brady might be done in Tampa Bay. We just saw Matt Ryan. He might have played his last game, move conferences. So, Matt Stafford, who knows how much longer he's going to go. So I don't feel like there's as much pressure being an NFC team to feel like we have to get a guy. Now, obviously, if you land that top 5, top 10 quarterback, it's going to potentially change the dynamic of this conference. But I don't feel like there's any pressure for the Falcons to have to feel like they have to, get that guy right away. They can wait, I think, and be a little bit patient there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've seen that this roster offense is being constructed, I think it very intentionally to not need the elite quarterback to function. I think they want to pass more than they did with Mariota, and I think you already were seeing that with Ridder. I think Mariota was averaging something like 23 passing attempts, and with Ridder in his 4 games, they were almost at, I think, 29 passing attempts per game. So they were clearly leaning not to a pass-heavy game script, certainly, but much more, balanced or closer to being balanced than they were with Marcus Mariota. And I think everyone looked at what they did with Marcus Mariota and said, this is what the Falcons want to be. They want to be extremely run-heavy team that doesn't even use their weapons that they drafted high, because this regime is incompetent. No, that's not the case. If you think that's the case, then that's fine. But I just, maybe I'm a fool, but, I really don't think Terry Fontenot is that stupid and Arthur Smith is that stupid that they went out of their way to draft 2 of the best pass catchers in their respective drafts and only throw the ball 23 times a game. It's just they were doing that to win with the extremely limited roster that they had, and try to put a semi-competent offense on the field. And to their credit, this offense was top 10 in scoring at one point with Marcus Mariota and that offense throwing 20 passes a game. So you can't really say that it didn't work, at least for a time, but that's not the end game. I think we've seen the shell of the offense they want to run. I think we've seen more or less the type of plays they want to run, but I think the balance of the offense and how involved guys like Kyle Pitts, for example, are going to be, 2022 is not a good example of what this team is going to look like going forward. I think they're going to run the ball as much as they can, because if you're getting 5+ yards per carry like they were in a lot of games this year, then of course you want to run the ball as much as you can. But the passing game is going to be much more focused. The question, of course, is can Desmond Ridder execute it, because Marcus Mariota could not. And I think that Ridder can execute it at a higher level than Mariota, and ultimately, to me, that's enough to hand him the keys next year. bring in a competent veteran to help him grow. But, worst case scenario, it doesn't work out, and with certainty that you need to be aggressive for quarterback in 2024 with what hopefully should be a drastically better overall roster. And I think that is what they want. That is the plan. We'll see if the plan works. That's the other side of the coin, is like, they've got all this money, they've got these good draft picks. Let's see them actually, make the right signings, add the right players in free agency and the draft, and put together a better roster. They still have to execute that part of it. But I think if they do, even if Ridder is just what he is now, this is a team that's probably winning more games, even, if you don't get much better quarterback play. So we'll, of course, see how it turns out. But, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly that this is the chance. Like, they drafted Ridder in the 3rd round. A lot of people see that as a knock on him. I see it as I don't think the Falcons expected him to be there that late. I think they'd sort of written off getting him when they decided to take guys like Trey Anderson and Arnold Ebiketie, who they probably had higher, in terms of their wish list. And then when he was still there in the 3rd round, they were like, hell yeah, let's get him. And, it could be a very good value pick. I wouldn't necessarily hold the fact that he's a 3rd rounder against him. Watch what he did on the field. Don't hold the fact that he was not a top 20 pick against him. Look at what he did on the field. And I think he did enough on the field to get his opportunity in 2023, notwithstanding some kind of crazy move, because other than that, like, I don't see, like, does Mitch Trubisky, I know you brought Mitch Trubisky up on Twitter. It's like, does he really move the needle for you in a positive way opposed to Desmond Ridder? Does a player like that really move you that far in another direction that you're going to go out and make a move like that? I mean, that's sort of where I land on it.
Yeah, and to be clear for folks, I was not suggesting Mitch Trubisky as a starter for the Falcons. I was trying
to throw you under the bus there. Good save, though. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Kevin. I need to clarify that, because some people were assuming that I was talking about it. And I was like, clearly I was talking about him. You guys got to scroll up on these Twitter threads, because I was talking about him as a backup, as the backup. And I think as a, because we were talking earlier about, like, Kevin, I agree with you. Like, Marcus Mariota to me would have been the ideal backup, but as you say, like, who knows if he's going to be back here? And so, like, to me, in terms of, like, if you want a backup quarterback, that in the event that, Desmond Ridder comes out and stinks up the joint next year and you have to make a move to the backup, Mitch Trubisky, while a very low level starter, it would be probably one of the 5 to 10 best backup quarterbacks in the NFL next year. So, like, as far as getting a backup that can come out and win games, like, he makes the most sense. Chase Daniel's just basically a quarterback's coach at this point in time as a backup. You don't really want I don't even know if Chase Daniel started more than 5 games in his NFL career. He's been in the league for like 14 years or something.
Yeah.
So, he's not you're not bringing Chase Daniel in here to play. You're bringing him to study film and help Desmond Ridder play. So, just want to make that clear to anybody who thinks I'm advocating for Mitch Trubisky to be the starting quarterback. No, as a backup. That's all it was.
Yeah. Not anything else you want to add on the quarterback situation?
I think we've really just talked about it as ad nauseum.
I think we have, but I did want to give you an opportunity before we moved on, just in case. But yeah,
I mean, yeah, we will continue to break it down in the coming months. But yeah, the expectation is it's going to be Ridder with a veteran backup quarterback. I don't think it'll be Derek Carr for all intents and purposes.
Yes, it's not going to be Derek Carr. He just doesn't fit the scheme. He just doesn't.
I mean, yeah, it's I can't really add on to more than what you guys touched on so far. Ryan Tannehill is an option, just given the connection with Arthur Smith. We already know that Tannehill would be completely against teaching anyone anything, given his conflict with Malik Willis. Yeah. But I mean, shit, that could be a hell of a training camp battle, if we're being honest.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I would just say this thing about Ryan. I don't expect the Titans to move on from Ryan Tannehill, because Mike Vrabel does not strike me as the type of dude that wants to blow up his quarterback room and roll with Josh Dobbs, because he clearly can't stand Malik Willis.
Yeah, he hates Malik Willis.
So, I think the only way that Ryan Tannehill comes available is if somehow Mike Vrabel's able to lure Tom Brady to Tennessee, and then they would move on from Ryan Tannehill. And then I do think that's a real conversation that we might have to have if Arthur Smith is, all about winning games. He won a lot of games with Ryan Tannehill, so I could see them.
Speaking of winning, we could always bring in a proven winner like Stetson Bennett, a two-time national champion. The drive from Athens to Flowery Branch training facilities, it's not that bad of a drive. Let's be honest.
True.
So
Very true.
And Stetson Bennett can rent a car, and Desmond Ridder cannot. So
there you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah, he can rent a car and not pay that underage fee. So
yes. Well, yeah. I mean, honestly, like Ryan Tannehill would be the perfect backup, but I agree with Aaron. I think it's in recent weeks, it's become more and more clear that the Titans don't have another option at quarterback. So even though they puzzlingly decided to fire their GM mid-season, and then the whole team seemed to fall apart after that, which also was curious. I think that it's very unlikely that they do actually move on at this point. So that. Yeah, if he does get cut, I think the Falcons will definitely make an attempt to sign him. And I think they would try to make it clear to him that it will be a competition with Ridder. But maybe he wants to go start somewhere. But I feel like if I was Ryan Tannehill, I would want to get back together with Arthur Smith because those two made magic happen, and honestly, really hasn't worked out with anyone other than Arthur Smith for Tannehill. So. I wouldn't rule out Tannehill eventually winding up in Atlanta as the backup if Ridder takes off or whatever. Maybe in another year or two, he'll be like 37 at that point, but maybe he wants to be a backup for a few more years, reunite with Arthur Smith. Wouldn't rule it out, but yeah, I agree with Aaron that it's probably less likely to happen. All right, we got some donations to get through here before we wrap up, and I do want to touch on the defensive coordinator thing, but yeah, I know we actually got a question about the DC to wrap this up as well, so we'll get to it then. Brandon with the $5. Thank you so much, Brandon. He says, thoughts on getting Raheem Nunez-Roche next to Jarrett? I think Raheem Nunez-Roche is fine. I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to sign him. I think he could be a reliable depth piece, but I mean he's a fine player. And the name, of course, is awesome. I love saying it, so wouldn't be opposed to that either. But yeah, anybody else got strong Raheem Nunez-Roche takes?
He's a good backup nose tackle. I wouldn't necessarily see him as a starter.
Yeah,
that'd be fine.
Good rotational guy, but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go to my way to add him. But if he wants to come here, it's fine.
Was that Raheem's agent giving that?
Brandon? It's a very specific player. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to be asked about Raheem Nunez-Roche at all this offseason. So that's a deep cut right there. Great job, Brandon. We got George Costanza once again with the $5. Thank you so much, George. He says, I think Indy moves up to number 1 to get their quarterback. Oh, this is him officially giving his prediction for 8. If Jalen Carter's there at 8, obviously it's a no-brainer. However, I don't believe that's realistic. So right now, going to say Myles Murphy. Atlanta did Atlanta things, winning when it didn't matter. We may end up missing out on that blue chip edge. Yeah, Myles Murphy is a good pick, George.
I get behind Myles Murphy for sure. Yeah, Jalen Carter's not going to be there at 8.
Yeah, since my son Jared Verse ended up going back to school, I'm gutted. So I don't know what to do now at pick 8. But yeah, I guess if Myles Murphy lasts, that would be okay. But yeah. So yeah, okay, we're gonna write you down for Myles Murphy, George. That's a good prediction. I think there's a chance that he does, because I think Myles Murphy's gonna be a good athlete and he's a good prospect. But I think him getting that top 3, top 5 hype that he was getting earlier in the season, maybe a little rich. He's a very good edge. I think exactly the type of edge the Falcons need to add. They just need to add very good players that are his floor is super high. So. Definitely am not opposed at all to adding Myles Murphy. But, yeah, I think going at 8 is probably a better spot for him than going, top 3 like he was sometimes getting billed earlier in the season.
God, I would love a nice nice defensive end who's going to be a sure thing, good prospect.
Just a good 8 to 10 sack guy. Stop, everybody's oh, we want to get that 15+ sack guy. At this point, I would just take that really good run defender who gets me 8 to 10. I would be satisfied
Lamar
with
is
that.
on the floor right now.
Yeah.
We went high ceiling with Vic. We went high ceiling with attack, but maybe that's just not our forte. Maybe
Yeah.
we should just stop going like high ceiling, low floor guys.
Maybe. So, yeah, that's a good one though to predict. We got Brandon with the $3. Thank you, Brandon. He says thoughts on Tracy Rocker as a new defensive coordinator possibility. Honestly, I don't know a ton about Tracy Rocker, so can't really speak too much to that. I don't. I'm trying to look him up actually, but
I think he was the D-line coach in Tennessee for a couple of years.
Okay.
He's the Eagles defensive line coach right now.
Yeah, he former defensive tackle. Yep.
The Tennessee being the Tennessee Volunteers, not the Tennessee Titans. Well, he was the Tennessee Titans too. Then he became
a lot of Tennessee. Yeah, a lot of Tennessee connection.
But he wasn't there when Arthur Smith was there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it would be a less heralded name. I'd have to look into it more. Don't really know too much about him, to be honest. Yeah.
You don't see many D-line coaches as defensive coordinators. That's usually not the pipeline.
Yeah.
It's usually linebackers and secondary coaches.
Yeah. That is an interesting observation. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know too much about him. Sorry, Brandon. Can't really comment on him too much. We got Corey with the $1. He says Arthur Smith hates Michael Rothstein. Where do you get that thought? I mean, he didn't seem to hate him too much when I was there, but it's been a whole season since I was there, so maybe things have changed.
He doesn't like the hypothetical questions. That's basically.
Mike does like to ask a lot of hypothetical questions, so yeah.
Every question that Arthur Smith doesn't want to answer is a hypothetical question, so that's usually how it goes.
Yeah, I'm sure he's still higher up on the hierarchy than D-Led when it comes to preferences for Arthur Smith and the coaching staff.
Yeah. We got George Costanza with the $54. George, thank you so much, brother. George is I don't even know, George. You've been doing like $120 tonight. Jesus. Oh, he says he's trying to
right now.
Yeah, he is. Literally, they just flickered. So thanks, George. Yeah, he says last donation for tonight. Wanted to make sure I put a good dent in the Senior Bowl fund. Instead of matching donations, I'll just put that 20% up front. Let's go with the classic question that we haven't asked in a while. Adnan, what are you drinking tonight?
It has been a while. My glass is empty. I drank a ginger ale bold. So
okay.
I don't know if you guys have had it, but it's not to everyone's taste. It's like ginger ale made that new like bold taste where it's like extra ginger.
So ginger beer?
It's like ginger beer, but soda.
It's like ginger beer, but they called it something else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's no alcohol in it. It's like,
ginger beer doesn't have alcohol either. Yeah, it's funny that they actually call it that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like ginger ale bold, and
it's good. If you like ginger beer, you'll like it. But if you're not into very strong ginger taste,
it's like you either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
Like it's there is no like, oh yeah, I'm like indifferent. I'm like in the middle. You either think it's amazing or you think it's an abomination.
Yeah. No, I love ginger beer, which is more of a mixer than anything, but yeah, I just straight up drink ginger beer. I think it's delicious. So yeah, I would definitely like it, I'm sure. But I usually just buy ginger beer because I like to make mules with it. So, yeah, tasty stuff, I imagine. So good one. It's always different. Always different with Adnan.
I like to keep the I like to keep the viewers entertained, and I don't want to just come in drinking the same bland thing over and over again. We need some variety. It's why we're competing with Amazon right now.
Yeah, there you go. We got Nico with the $5. Hi, Kevin, Adnan, and Aaron. What's up, Nico? Thanks so much for your donation. Says, do you have any strong views on who should be the next Falcons defensive coordinator, or maybe who you don't want? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, to me, like, Ejiro Evero of the Broncos, if he doesn't end up getting a head coaching gig, would love it. He seems like a really smart guy, and like you're probably only getting him for a year or two before he gets a head coaching gig somewhere else, but really innovative coordinator, really like what he did in Denver. So that's probably my pick. Vance Joseph has sort of a checkered past. I do really like what he did with the limited personnel in Arizona. I think his style meshes really well with what the Falcons are doing. Brian Flores, if he doesn't get a head coaching gig, could be another one. But yeah, Aaron, you got any defensive coordinators that are on your mind?
Not really.
No, don't care. Just not Jim Haslett. Not Jim Haslett. Yeah.
I don't really care who the defensive coordinator is, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm a big believer that it's not about what the scheme you're running; it's about the guys you have running the scheme. So I'm much more invested in what D tackles and safeties and linebackers we're going to wind up signing in March than who's going to be calling the plays in September.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's respectable answer there, and it's definitely true. But yeah, I do have my preferences. Adnan, do you have any defensive coordinator preferences?
Yeah, the names you mentioned, Lovie Smith is an option. I threw the name Vic Fangio out there on Twitter.
Yeah,
I think
I like that one.
That's a hot dream. But
Lovely. It'd be a lovely dream, Adnan. It would be lovely, but
yeah, Vic Fangio's hell of a defensive coach. Not as good as a head coach, but defensive
he's not
coach.
He's not a great head coach, but I mean, like, he's had nothing but success as a DC. So I think that would be and maybe he would like the allure of having that full freedom with Arthur Smith to make the defense his own, the same way he had in Chicago. There's the Ryan Pace connection. Maybe we, get something positive out of that for once instead of those Bears retread players. So stay tuned. We'll find out.
Stay tuned. All right, final question tonight. Brandon with the $5. He says Brian Brzee at number 8 is my pick. Yeah, Brian Brzee is going to be a real polarizing guy. I already know I'm like lower than consensus, I think, on him, just because production is a pretty sizable part of my eval. And Brzee just never really had the production. Now there's reasons for that. Clemson doesn't necessarily maximize his production. They make him play the run a lot. That's just sort of how Clemson's defense works. But athletically, size-wise, all that, prototypical, definitely shows the flashes. But yeah, I mean, Brzee is definitely going to be one of those guys that could go really high or last into the teens, and we'll see. But yeah, right now I'm pretty hesitant on Brzee. I mean, I haven't done his full eval, but the lack of production definitely scares me off. But yeah, anybody else got some deep Brian Brzee takes at this point? Because that's basically all I have on Brzee right now.
I have Brzee takes. His 2022 film is very hot and cold, is the way I describe it. It's like when you look at the good games, like, he's very good, and you're like, yeah, this guy, I get why he's being projected by some people to be a top 5 pick. And then there were some games that he was not very good in, and you're like, I don't think this guy's a first round player, but some of that is owed to some injuries he's dealing with. Like in the middle of the season, he was dealing with a kidney infection, and the first couple of games coming off of that kidney infection, like, he did not look like he was in shape or anything like that. I know he was dealing with some issues in his private life too, with the death of his sister from cancer early in the season. So I'm sure that also had an effect on his play as well. So he's one of those players that I agree with you, Kevin. Like, it would not shock me at all if he's like the first player taken, non-quarterback taken after Jalen Carter and Will Anderson, in as like the 5th pick. It would also not shock me at all if he falls, into the 20s, maybe even the 30s, because he does have some injury history. And the thing that hurts a player's draft stock more than anything, the NFL, makes a big deal about character, but ultimately at the end of the day, if you're a talented enough player, they do not care about, character issues. But it is injuries that do affect a guy's draft stock more than anything, because, as they say, availability is the best ability. And if they don't think you're going to play, then they're not going to draft you. So I think that'll be, I think, the biggest issue that Brzee has to deal with, because he tore his ACL last year, had the kidney infection as well. So there's been some injury stuff with him that may affect his stock.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And he's definitely that guy. He's like the Rashawn Gary, I feel like, of this class, like a guy that you can clearly see what everyone loves, but then it's just like, I'm so skeptical also. And I was way lower on Rashawn Gary than consensus. And Gary eventually did, I think, hit his ceiling for the Packers. but it took a while. It took 2 years, I think, of him not really doing a whole lot. So, it's not the worst thing in the world for this Falcons team if eventually Brian Brzee, had a Rashawn Gary path and in 3 years was like a really good player for them. But I'm just the production, the lack of production, the injuries scares me off a little bit in the top 10. But some team probably will take. I mean, Tyree Wilson's kind of similar. I mean, the production definitely has been there with Tyree Wilson, but another guy that's a really high ceiling, but consistency has not really been his calling card sort of thing. So a lot of those types of guys in this class that are going to be interesting to talk about as we go further. But guys, we've already been here for over an hour and a half, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We had a lot to cover, and we didn't mention it earlier, so we will now. Best of luck, Dean Pease, in your retirement. Appreciate him spending a few years here in Atlanta. Really cool to have such a legendary coach here, even if the defensive results weren't, I think, as good as some were hoping. It's really cool to have that coach here, and I think his impact will continue to be felt for years. I think you could tell how much the players respected him and his experience, and I think he was probably an invaluable aid for Arthur Smith in his development as a coach too. So I'm not sure we'll ever fully appreciate what Dean Pease brought to this team because of the defensive results, but best of luck in retirement. Enjoy it, and thank you for spending a few pretty difficult years here in Atlanta. I mean, he didn't have to take this job and get saddled with this situation, and he did. So mad respect to Dean for doing that for us. So don't have too much else to add, guys. Like, subscribe. If you're listening to the podcast audio, leave us that 5-star review. And like I said, if you're interested in donating to the Senior Bowl Fund, you can do so off the air as well. Just make sure if you do it on Streamlabs, we'll read it on the next show. Leave your question there, or you can do it on Venmo at my Twitter at Falcoholic Kevin. Before we take off, want to thank my guests this evening. First of all, Aaron Freeman, host of the Locked On Falcons podcast. He is at FalcFans on Twitter. Aaron, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off?
Yeah, first I would like to plug that Senior Bowl whatever the pot, right? Just because if you get all your money, Kevin, maybe I can get some of that money that's left over to refund me, because I'm going to the Senior Bowl this year.
Oh, are you?
We get to watch.
Wow. Okay.
So we'll get to watch Tyree Wilson, wreck guys or completely disappoint us in those one-on-ones this year. So
there's no middle ground yet.
We're either going to love him or hate him. We're either going to come out of that week thinking he's definitely the pick, or I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. So looking forward to that and those conversations, checking that out with you. And of course, people know, check out Locked On Falcons. Earlier tonight on Locked On Falcons, we had an interview with Ben Grant, who covers the Toronto Argonauts, and he came on to talk about Jamal Peters, the new CFL corner that the Falcons signed, and talking a little bit about whether or not he could be the next D. Alford. He brings a lot more size to the table than D. Alford did, so he's an interesting player that I think will have an interesting opportunity to maybe earn some playing time for the Falcons this season. So go check out that episode on YouTube right now, or of course, the audio version will be up, Friday morning on wherever your podcast platforms that you like to subscribe to that illustrious Locked On Falcons.
Yeah, Brandon was saying I forgot to say illustrious, so thank you for adding it. I forgot to get that to squeeze that in. But yeah, thanks again, Aaron, for coming on tonight. Also with us, Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. Adnan, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off?
Doing my final fantasy stud and dud of the season, where it looks at the entire year's worth. And then I will be doing a Tyler Allgeier rookie review article sometime next week.
All right. Yeah, definitely look for that stuff. Guys, good stuff coming from Adnan. Not a lot of Falcons fantasy studs this year, but late in the season, if you happen to be carrying Allgeier, he probably could have helped you win some playoff games for sure, because he really started to heat up. And of course, the God Michael Pruitt. If you needed a tight end streamer, God right there. So, but yeah, guys, really appreciate everyone for coming back tonight for episode 226. We will be back on our regular schedule going forward. As you guys know, I will be at the Senior Bowl. Apparently, so will Aaron. And I will be bringing you all that great content from Mobile. That'll be late in the month. And I will have something I believe coming out on Monday, breaking down the salary cap situation for 2023 in exhaustive detail. So hopefully they won't make any like major moves before that show comes out, so I don't have to go back in and edit, all my graphics. But anything's possible, I guess. But they can't sign anyone that's not a futures contract. So how big could the moves be? I say that now, but yeah. Then now I've definitely doomed myself. But yeah, guys, look for that. And I'll be getting into some Senior Bowl prospects as well over the next couple weeks, as well as some more offseason preview stuff. We got all kinds of great things coming at thefalcoholic.com as well. So check out the site, follow the show at Falcoholic Live. Check out the Patreon if you want to support us on a monthly basis. It's patreon.com/Falcoholic Live. And again, subscribe, give us that 5-star review if you enjoyed the show. We really appreciate everyone who donated to the Senior Bowl Fund, everyone who hung out and chatted with us tonight. We'll be back on Wednesday for the next live show. Until then, guys, enjoy the rest of the week. Enjoy the NFL playoffs. We will see you next time on the Falcoholic Live. Have a great night.